Welcome to Beyond the Arc, the CBS Sports NBA podcast. I am your host today, Sam Quinn. Joining me to talk all things hoops today, my coworker at CBS Sports, my friend, as I learned yesterday, youth basketball and wiffle ball coach, Brad Botkin. Brad, I got a wiffle ball question for you. Are you the long yellow skinny bats or are you
Yeah.
the fat orange ones?
Well, it's all about skill level. I was a serious wiffle ball player when I was young. So if you were in the big game, you couldn't be playing with the fat red bat. You got to you can't use the red bat. That's like no. That's recess. I play Yankees wiffle ball.
That's ridiculous. I can't use those yellow bats. Like you're swinging with I just the ball to bat ratio is ridiculous there. When I was at summer camp as a kid, it was the orange bats, the fat one. It's the torpedo bat 20 years early where you could like always get it in the barrel. You're smacking that thing.
Oh yeah.
No yellow bats for me. I need the gutters when I bowl.
You were probably using the big softball ones too.
Oh, 100%.
Oh,
this is not a wiffle ball pod. This is a basketball pod. Brad, we got some good news for your favorite team last night, or at least the best news that we could hope for, right? Early game 2, Amen Thompson crashes. Jimmy Butler leaves the game, and all of a sudden we're thinking to ourselves, Jimmy Butler might be done for the series. Is this it for the Warriors? Well, we get some pretty good news last night. It came a little bit late. You were annoyed in Slack about this all day yesterday, how long this MRI took. But Jimmy Butler has a deep glute muscle contusion, right? No fractures, no structural damage, but he is in serious jeopardy for game 3. So for now, let's assume that he's either out of game 3 or compromised significantly in game 3. You are Steve Kerr. I am putting you in his position. I know you thought you could do it better than him for a long time. So what is your approach? What is your approach to game 3 with either no Jimmy Butler or a compromised Jimmy Butler? What are you doing differently to compensate for that injury?
Low blow. Gosh, this is tough because Jonathan Kuminga clearly needs to be dusted off, and he was terrible in game 2. It's hard to blame him because I mean I don't know how many games he's gone without playing, but probably close to 2 weeks, week and a half, and then you jump into a super physical, super intense series, and he just wasn't aggressive enough. He was not sure of himself, and so maybe that game got him some rhythm, got him some juice. Got him some vibe of being back on the floor and not feeling like Tyrese Halliburton in the Olympics. And if that's the case, he's the obvious answer. You know, Kuminga is a good player. This is not a bench. This is like a Tatum benching on the Olympic team, relatively speaking. It's just like these lineups don't work with Draymond and Jimmy and sometimes Peyton and oftentimes 3 non-shooters on the floor. It just doesn't work. But Kuminga can play, and absent Jimmy, they occupy a lot of the same spots on the floor. And actually, even with Butler in the lineup, I've thought that Kerr could maybe steal some minutes for Kuminga in this series just for some athleticism, just for some kind of rim pressure, for somebody that can create some kind of space, because it was so evident without Jimmy in game 2 against this kind of pressure. And the way the officials are letting the teams play across the board in the playoffs, we look old. We look even Curry. It doesn't look like we can create any space. It doesn't with Jimmy in there. There's sort of a methodical madness to it that he's always probing the paint. He's always able to get even subtle leverage, and it connects everything. It makes everything move and flow. They couldn't move at all, even with Curry on the court. So you need somebody. Podziemski didn't play much in game 2. He's another guy that can get into the paint. But we need guys who can loosen up that defense because they're extending out far. They're double teaming. They're trying to rip Curry's limbs off. I would think Kuminga would be the obvious answer to get in there and hope at least early in the game that he can establish a rhythm and then go from there.
So I wrote about this after game 2. The fit with Kuminga in Golden State has always been really awkward, right? And I think you can sort of apply what I'm about to say to James Wiseman as well, where the Warriors won 3 championships and then they won a 4th, playing this very specific style that is not really common around the NBA, with all of the movement, all of the passing, that Kuminga didn't really fit into, right? Like Franz Wagner would have been the guy to pick there who made sense in the way that they played. Maybe Şengün, LaMelo, Halliburton during the Wiseman year. I found it very interesting that after winning 3 titles playing their way, they used back-to-back high lottery picks to take like what I would basically call like normie picks, right? Like these athletic trait guys who make sense on a normal team and not necessarily on your team. And they never quite figured out how can we make Kuminga fit into the way that we play, right? With all of the movement, with all of the high IQ instinct stuff. And I think that you can look at Kuminga and say on a normal team, he might make some sense. But there have been guys that the Warriors have had, like Kelly Oubre, who's a good player, but just not a good Warriors player, right? So you fast forward to right now, as you said, Kuminga doesn't really fit into those Butler, Draymond lineups, not enough shooting on the floor. But where they're at right now, if Butler is out, now suddenly, given the physicality of the series and how good Houston's defense is, you almost have to play a little bit more normie ball, right? Like you have to play a little bit more pick and roll. I thought it was interesting. They used Kuminga as the screener for Curry a little bit in game 2. That's something I'd like to see them do a little bit more. I think the idea of the way that Kuminga played in game 2 was like mostly interesting, right? Like he was going at the basket. He wasn't finishing well, but he was using the athleticism at least a little bit. I think that's something you're going to want to pick up on, and you want to include him in the game plan and like actually get him going, right? I think part of the problem that he's had in Golden State for so long is that he's sort of this auxiliary piece that's not getting the on-ball development reps that you typically expect out of a number 7 overall pick. The Warriors just don't play that way, right? Like they typically don't just force the ball to somebody for the sake of doing it. Well, now no Jimmy Butler. Podziemski he was sick in game 2. We'll see if he's feeling a little bit better for game 3. But you need offense so badly that you kind of have to force the issue to Kuminga here. So it's kind of like a perfect storm for him, right? Where it looked like his time with the Warriors was totally up. Now he's going to play like a pretty important role, at least for game 3, we would assume, if not the rest of the series. So I think a lot of this does hinge on Kuminga. I want to throw out one other player to you. Is there any part of you that's wondering if Kevon Looney needs to play a bigger role in this series? I'm just going to throw out the numbers. He's played 22 minutes. When he's been on the floor, they're getting almost 48% of the rebounds, right? Like they're surviving on the glass. They're not getting absolutely killed like they are when, Stevens and Şengün are just going nuts on the board. When he's off the floor, they're giving up 60% rebound rate to Houston. They can't get a rebound to save their lives. Do you go to Looney and try to beat the Rockets at their own game?
You're not trying to beat the Rockets. Survive is the right word. A couple of things. A lot to unpack here. So I don't think that I wouldn't put Kuminga anywhere near the Wiseman or Kelly Oubre camp of guys who just either aren't very good or aren't good Warriors. The Kuminga actually has fit very well. I think that the lineups simply don't work as they wouldn't in any system. You can't, no team's playing with 3 complete non-shooters. And the only reason that the Warriors have been able to play with 2 all these years is because of Curry and Clay. So I actually think Kuminga jives pretty well with Steph. Traditionally, yeah, he would be kind of your prototypical athlete that you would maybe give the ball and let him create. But that's actually, ironically, even though that seems to fit well with his natural gifts, that actually is what ends up taking him out of his game the most. That's when he sort of starts to be like a poor man's Giannis. And he's kind of doesn't really have the nuance to his athleticism to really control the ball in an NBA game. So he's actually fits pretty well in this Warriors system. And I also think there's some, in terms of the Warriors taking a guy like Kuminga and committing to that kind of athleticism, is you can really get pretty, and the Warriors have done this, to be fair, but you can get pretty high on yourself and think that your system is everything. The Heat do it sometimes. The Patriots did it sometimes. And really that relies on having Tom Brady or Jimmy Butler in Miami or Stephen Curry in Golden State. It doesn't mean that you can just keep playing that system forever. There's an element of Golden State's system that's just Stephen Curry. And so guys like Kuminga are going to be needed for that next wave, and they're needed right now because there's a lot of these, now to get to your point about Looney, there's a lot of these things happening in this series that the Warriors can't win. I thought from the start, they're not a better team than the Rockets from a top to bottom standpoint, from an across the board spectrum. They're better if you think they're better because they have the two best players. That's just plain and simple. They're smaller, they're less athletic, they're getting hammered on the glass, and sort of like the Lakers used to have to do, and to some degree still have to do. If you start having to decide between players who are compromised in one area and players who are compromised in another, like, okay, let's put Looney on the floor because we're getting killed on the glass. Now our shooting's even worse. Our scoring's even worse. Or let's put Moody out there and Podziemski and play really small and try to make shots, but now our defense isn't the same as if it's Peyton and Looney. So it's really tough. The Warriors need Jimmy Butler. So we're going to talk about all these things that they can do. They really can't do anything if Jimmy Butler can't at least play. That's first, if he can play, because if he can play, the presence alone. And listen, let's kind of be straight about this. He's going to play. I would be shocked if Jimmy Butler doesn't play from a butt bruise in game 3. I'm surprised he didn't find a way to come back in game 2. I think that game just got so out of hand so quickly. I would be shocked if he didn't play. So the question becomes, how effective is he going to be? His presence alone, if we can even get the Jimmy that we got early on in his Warriors tenure, where he wasn't so aggressive to score, he was more of a connector, can at least sort of get into the paint, kick back out, make smart passes, keep the offense sort of oiled, then that'll give Curry a chance to have a crazy game, which is what this comes down to. So we can talk about all this nuance. Kuminga plays, Looney plays. If Butler doesn't play, we need a huge Curry game. Or if Butler isn't effective, we need a huge Curry game. And the best chance you have of that happening is Jimmy Butler connecting the pieces. That's all there is to it. So yeah, Kuminga's going to have to play. You're probably going to have to stretch some lineups with Butler, or you could stretch some lineups with Kuminga and Butler on the floor at the same time. But to me, this is real simple. The Warriors are outmatched defensively. They're outmatched on the boards. And when Jalen Green is shooting, they're outmatched from an explosive offensive standpoint everywhere outside of Curry. So we came into this series, Sam, with everybody using the Warriors' pedigree and the way that they played down the stretch of the regular season as some sort of like the Rockets are huge underdogs. They're not. You know, I crumbled at the last second and I picked the Warriors. But this is an absolute coin flip series with Jimmy Butler at full strength. It's a coin flip. Now the Warriors are having to hope for a big time Curry performance in game 3.
Well, you bring up the necessity of having this huge Stephen Curry game in game 3, and it reminds me of what Kevin Durant said a few years ago, where he says, oh, our motion offense can only take us so far. Sometimes you just need players, star players, to win one-on-one. And I think that's a good segue. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to hit what's going on in Denver, where it's one man and not much else. So stick around. When we come back, we're going to talk Nuggets Clippers.
We dig it. Do you? The Pro Volleyball Federation on CBS Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. I am once again Sam Quinn. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, you know, all those apps, Spotify, Apple, et cetera, et cetera. Download, subscribe, leave us a review, write a note in a bottle and toss it into the ocean. Whatever you have to do to get the word out, please, helps us out tremendously. Let's talk Nuggets Clippers. And when I say let's talk Nuggets Clippers, what I'm really saying is let's talk Jokic Clippers. Because my God, man, like, what's going on in Denver? Can somebody help this man out a little bit? I checked the scoring averages for this series. After Jokic, Gordon, and Murray, the fourth leading scorer for Denver is Russell Westbrook, averaging a crisp 10.6 points per game. Michael Porter Jr. has had 2 bad games, 1 not so bad game. According to Ramona Shelburne, he is playing at like 20-30% with that shoulder injury. Are we headed for a swift demise for the 3-time MVP, Brad?
God, I always hate overreacting to one game because the series could have been 2-0 Denver. So I hate to do that. I don't think so. I would, you know, if by swift demise, I would assume you were saying 5. I still think the Nuggets are going to win a game and make this go 6. And once it goes 6, it can go 7. So I wouldn't say that, but I do think the grander conversation around the Nuggets and what they can do moving forward with all these debilitating contracts, you know, you're better equipped to talk about this than me, but this is very this is very quickly becoming one of these second apron teams that you've paid Michael Porter, you've paid Jamal Murray, and with Nikola Jokic, you're basically bound by a top heavy team. And if those top heavy guys are not so good, which we've seen even in Phoenix, those guys aren't good enough. And Murray's been good. So it's not like, the Denver has no chance when it's just Jokic, but at least now we're talking about who do they have below Jokic and Murray. Aaron Gordon started off hot last night and then went in the tank. I still think that they have enough when those guys are playing good enough and the Clippers aren't abnormally making threes, which I think the Clippers are, I don't know their exact ranking, but they're not a 3-point. They were way outside the box last night. I think I haven't looked at their season stats, but I'm pretty certain that they don't shoot threes like that. So if they sort of regress to the mean, the Nuggets have, at least in my mind, restored the faith that Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter and Christian Brown can be a dominant starting lineup. And then you're just back to at least the same problem that all top heavy teams have, which is a lack of a bench. But no, I wouldn't say they're in for a swift demise, but I am in the camp of they can't get much better. So whatever you think they are right now, you probably can't trade Jamal Murray. Whatever you think they are right now, that's the scary conversation, is that they seem pretty topped out.
So the big concern for me is the issues that they're having on the court right now. They feel so basic, right? So roster building 101, where game one comes and James Harden and Ivica Zubac are just torching Jokic in pick and roll over and over and over again. They're getting good shots all throughout the first half of that game. Eventually they adjust and they say, okay, we're going to start putting more help there. They come back, they win game one, and I think a little bit of a fluky way, but they do get the win. Game two comes, and okay, we can't just flambe you with James Harden over and over again. So we're going to Kawhi, who's going to make every single contested shot. He might not do that every game, but the Clippers have another way to attack you, right? The Clippers have a second, true star-level shot creator. They win game two on Kawhi's shooting. Nothing you can do about that, fine. Game three comes, and what the Clippers have decided is, if you're going to show help on all of these pick and rolls, I don't know what Denver's help rules were in game three. Whatever they weren't working, because there were just so many instances where the Clippers would run a pick and roll and there would be four guys in the paint, and you would either get just one clean pass into the corner, wide open three, or you'd get okay, we've got you in rotation, pass, wide open three. They shoot 11 of 20 on wide open threes in game three. Is that sustainable? No, but if you look at the quality of the threes, these are wide open threes, right? They're totally easy. It feels like a lot of what the Nuggets are doing defensively is just really based on this idea that they don't think Chris Dunn can make threes, so they're helping off of him a ton. Well, early in game three,
he can make them though. He's showing
him now.
He can make them.
So once he's making those threes,
yeah,
you stick with those same help rules way too long, and now all of a sudden, Batum, every time he touches the ball, it's one of the two same things, right? It catches it high, wide open, easy three, or catches it low, one dribble, fly by on the closeout, one dribble, swish, easy three.
You're hitting on an important point across the playoffs right now. There's two teams for which offense looks easy right now. It's the Clippers and the Pacers. Everyone else is fighting for their life for offense. And it comes down to the way that they're calling it. This is war. I think we've all long been a proponent of get rid of this, you can't even play defense. Let's have some competition. And it has revved that back up. These things are threatening to break over into a fight every other possession. And I love it as a viewer, but it is making offense extremely difficult, except for the Clippers and the Pacers, who are, to your point, waltzing into the paint, and they just are getting easy offense. It's one pass, two passes for a good look, a good, clean look. It looks like regular season basketball. And that is not the case for anyone else across the board. So if we're talking about what the real issue is for the Nuggets right here, it is that offense is just so much easier for the Clippers, and I mean, I think this is why we all picked them from the start, is they just have more good players. They have more guys that really, truly threaten you, from a Norm Powell to a Chris Dunn to a Derek Jones in the middle to Zubac is probably the best player in the league relative to how he gets talked about. There's so many more places for them to go that just a couple of passes, Batum gets the ball to a guy that can really hurt you, where the Nuggets are really defined in who they have to get the ball to, even for all of Jokic's creativity, and you kind of never know where the pass is going and random cuts. And even for that element, you more or less know you've got to play two-man game with either Gordon and Jokic on cuts or Jokic and Murray up top with DHOs. You pretty much know you've got to go to that. And yes, the Clippers are going to play pick and roll with James Harden, but there's just more places to spray the ball and more guys that once they catch in easy positions against a scrambling defense, that they can attack against closeouts and make plays, shoot threes. So they don't typically have to shoot a lot of threes, but pretty much everyone on their team can make them, as Chris Dunn included. So I just think in the end, they have more good players. And given the defensive softness of Denver, I do think that ultimately they're just going to get easier shots and win the series.
Well, you bring up the Clippers and the Pacers as the two teams that are getting easy offense, right? And I think the Nuggets and the Bucks are in somewhat similar situations. The Nuggets are slightly better in this regard, but they're in somewhat similar situations where they're these teams that are built around like maybe the best player in each conference, right? We think Jokic is the best player in the world. And I think Giannis is probably the best player in the East. It's either him or Tatum. And then after that, it's one shot creator. It's a small guard in Lillard for the Bucks, Murray for the Nuggets, and just not nearly enough defensive versatility after that. The Bucks can't stop a nosebleed right now, right?
Or like pressure. It's not even versatility used to be the buzzword, and it's still important, of course, but it's pressure. It's pressure. Even you saw the Knicks last night, where they were sort of built on the premise that everybody can switch and they have all these two-way wings and everyone can guard multiple positions. And that was always but like ball pressure, if officials are letting them play this way, ball pressure is even more important than switchability. And the Nuggets don't put any ball pressure on you. There's no Chris Dunns out there. There's no Norman Powell. And the Bucks, I mean, give me a break. Lillard, Kuzma, and AJ Green, and I mean, even Giannis is more of like he can just guard multiple positions. This is where you miss a Drew Holiday. The ball pressure, that's what's hurting Curry in the Warriors series. That he's getting doubled out to 30 feet, and these guys are de-limbing him. So there's just no ball. That's what I mean, where the Clippers and the Pacers are waltzing into the paint with relatively no restriction. The ball pressure is everything right now. Ball pressure, ball pressure, ball pressure.
Brad, I'm so happy you bring up ball pressure. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I have a point I want to make on this exact regard. But we're going to take a break now. We'll be back in a moment. Beyond the Arc on CBS Sports.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Gareth Bale! Ronaldo! Wonderful goal!
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Welcome back to Beyond the Arc on CBSSports.com. If you are listening on Spotify, leave us a comment in the episode. Just look on below the play button on Spotify and the Spotify app. Tell us what you think. Give us some questions. Give us some ideas, some comments, whatever floats your boat. Brad, you bring up ball pressure, and I think this is so important, and it's a little bit of a segue into another series I want to talk about, but I also think this is very important in a macro sense. Cade Cunningham, according to NBA.com's tracking data, is shooting 10 of 32 when OG Anunoby is his defender. And he's shooting 50% when anybody who is not named OG Anunoby is defending him. You bring up the importance of switchability in the past, how that was the buzzword. You wanted to have five guys who could like generally guard like size, where you can, like the Warriors were great at this. Boston was last year too, where anybody can kind of guard anybody. I do sort of feel like switchability now is more and more becoming a half measure, because teams are getting so good at forcing whatever matchup you want. If you have one of the like 5 or 6 or 7 defenders in the NBA who are basically switch proof, right? Who can always force their way back into the play, who can deny screens and consistently put ball pressure on these stars, That is such a massive advantage in the playoffs. So who is that? It's OG Anunoby. It's Amen Thompson for Houston. It's several guys for the Thunder, right? Like Dort, I think, is the best screen denier in the NBA. We saw what Caruso did to Memphis last
Oh
night,
my
which
God,
felt
Caruso.
unfair.
Caruso.
Cason Wallace does that a little bit too. It's like it's a handful of guys in the NBA who basically, I don't want to say like make you switch proof, but basically say we can get pressure on the ball whenever we want it. And we are so good and we're going to be so disciplined behind the play that if we need to like scram switch and figure it out and like do whatever it takes to get like back into alignment, we can do it. But those ball pressure guys are just so immensely valuable. And I think that's a lot of where playoff defense is going, where it's no longer enough to just be like, we have 5 guys who are 6'8", go nuts.
Totally.
I don't think switch everything, like team offenses have adjusted to the switch everything era, right? And I think the Bucks don't have good personnel for it, but we saw this in game 2 where the Bucks tried to switch everything for a little bit, and the Pacers were just kind of looking at each other like, really? Like, we can just get Pascal Siakam on whoever we want, right? Like, we can get Brook Lopez on the perimeter against Halliburton, really? Like, you're just going to give that to us? Okay.
The key to this, it's an important point that you're making. I remember talking to Nate McMillan about this back when he was coaching Indiana, I believe. This was a long time ago, but this was kind of when switching was really coming into favor. And he was like really against it. He was old school. He wanted you to he thought switching ball screens were just sort of like a concession. And there are a lot of cases where they switch way too softly. But now the defense is a combination of the two. You almost have to switch ball screens to some degree because you're just there's too many guys that can pull up now. So you can't, even if you fight over super hard, that's a mentality thing. But from just a straight up execution standpoint, it's very difficult to recover enough for these guys that can pull up off that ball screen. So the question becomes how quickly you scramble back to your original matchups. And then 2, it's still good to be able to switch. Like if McCall and OG and Hart and all these guys on the Knicks, it's cool that you can all switch and guard the same players. But whatever the ball ends up in the guy that you're guarding, old-fashioned basketball, can you put pressure on it? That's the question. It's to your point, it's not good enough anymore just to sort of be able to switch and softly control the possession. Where I'm taking away the super easy stuff. No pull-up threes. You know, I let them swing it and I back 2 feet off and I'm not going to get murdered. I can control this possession. Control is not doing it. That's what Denver does. Yeah, they're controlling it, but it's still a soft, no-pressure defense. It's a sagged back. I'm talking about even when you do switch, now when the ball comes to your guy, the pressure is on. And now those are the guys you're talking about, OG. So it also brings importance to guys that even if they can't switch so much, like they can't guard across the spectrum, like Chris Dunn or Nembhard. Nembhard's a good example of this, where like at least in the one matchup where they have either switched or they will pressure the ball. And that's more important to me now than the 6'8" guy, to your point, who can back off and sort of surround the perimeter, but not pressure it.
This is the key to how the Pacers are not like the worst defense in the NBA when they were for parts of last year.
Yes.
Where Nembhard is so good on his matchups. And McConnell, to an extent, too, can bother these ball-handling point guards.
Yes.
And if you do get them switched into like, oh, no, Nembhard's in the post, panic, 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 I think defenses have gotten a lot better at quickly scram switching and like, we're going to fix our defense before you can fix the offense and take advantage of that matchup, where I just think that was something that was not as like seared into your head as a defense in 2018 because switching wasn't as common.
Here's why. It's all about the officials because, okay, we're talking about some very gifted defenders in Chris Dunn and Amen Thompson and I would call Nembhard a very gifted on-ball defender. But it's all about how the officials let you play because no matter how good of a defender you are, you can't put the kind of pressure on an NBA creator, certainly a high-level one, a James Harden, a Steph Curry, a Damian Lillard, a Trae Young. You can't put that kind of pressure on those guys if they're not going to let you play physically. So this is a perfect storm of guys who are willing, guys who are able, and guys who are going to be officiated in a way that allows them to put pressure on. That's the key. Amin Thompson's a fantastic defender, but he's fouling Curry by old standards. So
speaking of which,
you have to be able to have the officials call it this way. And that's why all these series a lot of the offense has been neutralized, because you've got great defenders who are now actually being allowed to defend.
well, speaking of which, I mean, I think back to those battles that the Warriors and Rockets had at the peak of the Warriors dynasty, where, look, Chris Paul is who he is. Like, we know what his reputation is. Chris Paul would get away with so much that wouldn't get called because the refs would kind of just think to themselves, oh, he's 6 feet. No way is he fouling Kevin Durant. Where every time Kevin Durant would bring the ball low, Chris Paul's arms would get in there and he'd be getting away with all of these things that were very clearly fouls. I feel like more and more small defenders are getting away with that when they are forced to switch now. That's part of what's going on here. I think we're going a little bit too far with the physicality. Like, I do think there's just such a chasm between what we allow in the regular season and what we allow now. I'd like us to get a little bit closer to equilibrium, but I do want to go back to the switching for a second, because I think switching is kind of the defining element of what's going on in this Lakers-Timberwolves series, right? Where the entire narrative is that all the Lakers are doing is hunting for Rudy Gobert, pulling him out onto the perimeter, and letting their guys try to cook him one-on-one. And you know what? There have been a few highlight moments in that series in which Luka makes some crazy shot, or Austin Reeves gets Rudy Gobert out on the perimeter, gets him dancing, gets by him, and he pulls in the incredible finish. When you look at the actual points per possession numbers on those plays, it looks to the naked eye like they are clearly working and this is good offense. But then you look at how many points per possession they're scoring and how many points the Lakers are scoring offensively as a whole. They lost game 1 scoring 95, and they won game 2 scoring 94. This is not good offense for the Lakers. To just say all we're going to do is pull Rudy Gobert out, I think that is the defining trait of this series. What are you thinking if you're the Lakers? Are you sticking with this strategy, or are you trying to diversify your offense a little bit so that we're not just thinking, hey, what if we try to put Rudy Gobert on Shaqtin' a Fool tomorrow?
Yeah, I noticed that too. And a lot of that is Luka Doncic. He's clearly on a mission to embarrass Rudy Gobert. It's going outside of the realm of, is this the Lakers strategy, and more into, as soon as Luka sees Rudy, he's lighting up because he has a bone to pick with him. Every single time he puts a bunch of moves, he's looking over at the bench. He was caught saying, get him out of the game. He wants to do, and any time a matchup like that becomes personal, it slows the offense down. It sort of removes or neutralizes your other components. And I don't think overall is the best way to play. You know, I've got PTSD from matchup hunting with Mark Jackson and the Warriors. Just because you have the right matchup in a particular possession on paper, it doesn't mean you should spam it. And in the big picture, to your point, you start looking at points per possession. You start looking at just good old-fashioned total points. And it's tough for that to add up sometimes. Luka Doncic can only cook Rudy. You're going to get, to your point, 4 or 5 highlight plays. But even on his highlight plays, he's had a couple where he did it quickly. But even on his highlight plays, it took him like 5 moves to really shake him. And that's when the offense is completely stalled out, whether that bucket goes in or not.
Well, the other thing is these highlight plays are like, they're not like easy shots, right?
No.
For the most part, it's like Luka making some really cool one-legged step back, or Reeves doing an incredible finish. And it's like, yeah, I know that the temptation is to say, oh, we got Rudy on skates and Rudy can't defend this. Well, no, those are just star-level offensive players making great plays, which they're going to do in almost any situation, right? So yeah. I don't think you can look at that and just be like, oh, this is Rudy's fault.
He's actually done a decent job. Like I said, he's making Doncic do a bunch of moves. There's been very few where it's been like, you know, one move and he got twisted around backwards. There hasn't been that many of those.
So we go back to this Warriors push and pull between the system, the ball movement, all of that, and Kevin Durant's, oh, you also have to be able to do one-on-one. It's a little bit of a mix, right? You have to have both, where I think what made the Warriors special when they had Durant was that they could run their system until the cows came home. But if the time ever came where they really needed to just like, we need a bucket right here, give it to KD, you had that as an option. I think the Lakers right now are sort of this other extreme from the Warriors, where the Warriors sometimes get too cute and too into their team stuff. The Lakers right now, it is all one-on-one.
Totally.
Right? During the regular season,
Totally.
they averaged around 290 passes per game. First 2 games of this series, they're down to like 250, a little bit more than that. If you look at the tracking data, and yeah, some of this is wonky, fine. The movement, like the number of miles traveled their players have on offense, it's way down. It's not like a mile a game from like 9 to 8, something in that range, where like you just watch them on offense. So much of this is Luka gets the ball or Reeves gets the ball, and it's like looking for Rudy. One guy sets the screen. Now we have the matchup. Now I'm going to try to beat it one-on-one. And there are just so many moments where 3-4 guys are just standing around the perimeter going like, okay, like you got this, Luka. You got this, Austin. You have to incorporate those guys more, because part of what makes Luka, Austin, and LeBron so special as a trio is that they are such good passers. And if you can get the defense into rotation and you can get 2 guys looking at Luka when he goes to the basket, now suddenly you're 3 passes away from a wide open 3, or you're 2 passes away from a cut into a layup.
Yes,
and
yes.
that stuff, like outside, I think Dorian Finney-Smith had one really nice cut to the rim. Outside of that, it's just that stuff hasn't been there because they've gotten way too obsessed with this one-on-one stuff. So what are you thinking going into game 3? Like, what's your general vibe on the series?
It's tough. I for reasons outside of what you just said, which I think are important points that I'll touch on, but I still think the Lakers will win this series because, and it's tight because it's interesting what you say, because you have to get the right shots in the right way. But I still don't. Every time I look at the Timberwolves offense this year and I see that it's a top 10 unit, I'm like, that's not a top 10 offense. I swear the numbers say that. I know the numbers say they are. But it's difficult for me to believe that in what is probably going to be a 7-game series, if the Wolves are going to win, they're not going to like take the Lakers out, I don't believe, in 6. That over that span, Jaden McDaniels and Julius Randle, Naz Reid's pretty dependable, but that these guys are going to be knocking shots down. I still think that the fundamental aspect of this series is that when Anthony Edwards gets doubled, he's passing it to a way, way, way inferior player. And when
Luka, you say this, but look at game 1, where all of the Lakers were doing on defense was, we're going to double Anthony Edwards when he gets the ball because we don't have a one-on-one defender for him. He gets 9 assists. They make 21 threes. I think the Wolves have some of these one-on-one problems too, where their offense is at their best when Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards are feeling a little bit more selfless, right? They're passing to inferior players, but those inferior players have advantages by virtue of Edwards or Randle breaking the defense down.
I agree. There's still an old-fashioned part of me that I just don't think Julius Randle or Jaden McDaniels is going to make a game 7 threes or game 6. I still lean on that, but I'm not. You're right. The way they're creating those shots is the right way to do it. So it brings me back to what you said about standing and watching offense. This observant offense is not the way to play. To where if you're winning your one-on-one matchups in the micro, meaning in that one possession, and Luka cooks somebody and he scores, fine. But you're trying to win a game in the macro, and winning one-on-one possessions is not about always actually finishing with the bucket yourself. This whole Jimmy buckets, this whole idea that who are the Rockets going to give the ball to when they need a bucket? Very few games come down to 2 buckets. There's a lot of buckets in the game. What they come down to is winning your one-on-one matchup for leverage consistently. That's what Jimmy Butler did with the Heat. He was consistently winning his one-on-one matchup to the point where he just got leverage. He got into the paint, he sprayed the ball, and now Caleb Martin or Gabe Vincent or Tyler Hero or whoever gets going. And that's how you win with one-on-one players. And that's what Jimmy Butler brings to the Warriors. It's not like, man, we don't have any offense. We need Jimmy back so that he can just get buckets. That's not what it's about. Luka and LeBron, when Lakers are at their best, it's when Austin Reeves is catching against compromised defenses in rotation, because Luka won the one-on-one matchup, but he didn't feel the need to finish it. He started it, and now the ball swings, and now everyone's in rhythm, and now the defense is scrambling, and now you're attacking against closeouts, and now Austin Reeves doesn't have to be a 1A superstar creating against a set defense, even in a mismatch one-on-one matchup. Now he's creating as he's supposed to be, as a tier B superstar against either a favorable matchup or a defense in rotation. And that's where one-on-one is. So that's what the Warriors can't create. They can't create any leverage. No, even Steph Curry cannot get that initial leverage to take the top off of a possession. Then from there, Guy Santos can make threes if it's the right three. Podziemski can make threes. Moody can make threes. Draymond Green can make threes, but they're only going to make them if the leverage is created initially. And that's what having great one-on-one players is about. I'm so tired of hearing this. Who's going to get a bucket for him? That's why I'm worried about the Rockets offense. First of all, the Rockets are almost a top 10 offense. All this talk about how they can't score is crazy. But second, they have a bunch of guys that can create offensive leverage, namely Jalen Green and Sengun. So once you create that leverage, man, Dylan Brooks can make threes in a given game. They have guys that can make shots because they have guys that can win initial advantage situations. So one-on-one basketball to me is just about creating the initial leverage. From there, a bunch of guys can make threes in the NBA if they're the right looks.
Yeah, Brad, I think you nailed it. I think ultimately, if you want to simplify this as much as humanly possible, the goal of one-on-one is not to score one-on-one. The goal of one-on-one is to turn one-on-one into one-on-two. Once you get the second guy involved, That's where everybody else on the floor has advantages.
Exactly.
That's part of the advantage of having Curry, is even off of the ball, he does that, where he draws so many eyes, and that messes with the defense in so many ways. I think the winner of Game 3 tonight between the Lakers and the Timberwolves is going to win this series. And the reason I think that is that I think the longer this series goes, the bigger a disadvantage the Lakers are at, because the Timberwolves have so many more levers they're capable of pulling just by virtue of being deeper. It is so clear that JJ Redick only trusts 6 players right now, right?
Yeah.
It's Luka, LeBron, Reeves, Hachimura, Finney-Smith, Vincent. He cannot put Jackson Hayes on the floor for more than like the obligatory 8 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, Vanderbilt has been such a zero on offense that, if he's defending Ant, it might make sense. Some of the matchup stuff got really weird in Game 2. I thought they used Vanderbilt weirdly. They have 6 guys that they can trust. The Timberwolves have 7 or 8. That makes it a lot easier. That makes it a lot easier to make adjustments on the fly to say, oh, like this is a Naz Reid game. Let's lean into offense and play Naz and Randall together. Or, oh, this is a DiVincenzo game. We don't have to play Conley as much. So I will say this about Rudy, and I think to put a bow on this, I think a lot of the conversation about Rudy Gobert in this series has been very wrong. I do think he has been a problem for the Timberwolves. It just hasn't been on defense. It's been on offense, right?
Oh, my God. Is he the worst finisher in history?
We spent all this time talking about creating advantages and how can you turn a one-on-one into a one-on-two. And once you've done that, how can you use that to create easy buckets elsewhere? They're playing 4-on-5 on offense right now because Rudy is not finishing anything. And Rudy, most importantly, is not getting offensive rebounds. That's the key to this series for the Timberwolves. You're playing against a team without a center. You have to win on the glass. It's that simple. The Rockets figured that out. That's why they're playing Adams and Şengün together against these small Warriors, because they know their key to winning this series is winning the possession game, right? If you're plus 16 in rebounds, like you were in Game 1, you're not, even if you don't shoot well, you can keep the game close because you get more shots.
Exactly.
If you're not getting more shots as the Timberwolves, checkmate. You've lost. So, look, what I'm watching for Rudy Gobert, it's not the defense stuff. It's, can you finish the easy stuff? Can you take advantage when you're under the basket against a shorter guy? Can you get offensive rebounds and put them back? If he does that, Minnesota wins. If Rudy is going to play on offense and on the glass like he did in game 2, I lean towards the Lakers. So what I'm going to say here, I think the winner of game 3 wins the series, because I don't think the Lakers want this to be a 7-game series because they just have fewer adjustments available to them.
Well, you better. Well, I guess they could still lose one more game and win in 6. So yeah. The Lakers, they probably have to win this series, this game. I mean, statistics would say you're right. I think it's like 75% the winner of game 3 in a 1-1 series wins the series. So yeah, you're definitely taking a big jump forward in whoever wins this game. That's why last night was so big for the Clippers. That's why tomorrow night's game with the Rockets and Warriors is so big. That's a huge game 3 in these very evenly matched series. You know, Edwards, and we've sort of made this a pod about offensive creation, and really it's important. It can be boring, I guess, but it's the key to playoff basketball, because you're going to get pressured. They're going to let them defend more physically. So how are you using the offensive leverage that you do have to its maximum potential in terms of impact? And trying to cook Rudy Gobert is not maximum macro impact. But it does highlight an important development, I think, in Anthony Edwards' game, where I think Tatum went through this for a little bit when he.
I know where you're going, and he 100% did.
Okay, we'll see if I'm going where you think, but Tatum, there seems to be an evolution of young guys who can clearly score, can create their own, but don't always take the best shot. They like contested shots. They maybe have too much confidence sometimes, wrong spots on the floor. Edwards was guilty of that. He was not an efficient shooter. Tatum was the same way. Summoned his inner Kobe. And as they started making playmaking evolutions, it started with just being the primary assister, where they started to figure out how to your point, be guarded by 2 with 1 and find the right guy directly for the shot. And what they've both settled into very, very effectively now is the willingness to just be the guy to get the possession started. That I don't have to be the scorer or the assister. And that's key, because you can be just as selfish. I always laugh when I hear guys like Reggie Miller or something on the broadcast, and somebody will make like clearly what is basically the only pass to make. And they're like, unselfish. Assisting is selfish too. Rajon Rondo used to be a very selfish assister. And so
Westbrook is another one.
Yeah, exactly. If you're the guy that has to be the guy that passes to the guy, then you're still dominating the possession. And Anthony Edwards has gotten fantastic at being willing to subtly pull himself away and with him a couple of defenders and let the other guys actually get the credit for the possession. You actually have to look into the weeds of the film to appreciate the impact. He won't get the assist. He won't get the bucket. Sometimes he'll get the secondary assist, but he's become very good at that. And that's more what Luka needs to be leaning into. It's like, because when he passes off the ball, he's passing to maybe the greatest player of all time, and vice versa for LeBron. So Anthony Edwards is doing it even without that advantage. And that's really key. And I think a big reason why the Wolves are actually a top 10 offense when it doesn't feel that way is because Edwards has gotten really, really good.
This was a side effect.
Controlling possessions.
This was a side effect of the everybody is 6'8" NBA that had sort of been cultivated over the last decade or so. Was a lot of these guys that are primary offensive engines were growing up not as point guards, right? Where like it used to be that guys who were going to have the ball a lot were growing up playing point guard and knowing, oh, here's how I have to keep everybody involved. Here's how I have to make the smart pass that's not necessarily going to lead to the assist. I think a major development milestone now for guys who are primary ball handlers but came up more as scorers than as passers is you start at, oh, I just want to take every shot. And then the next step is, oh, I just want to make the obvious pass, the like easy pass into the corner. And then, oh, now I learn how to make the skip pass. And then eventually it's just, now I fully understand how I'm leveraging a defense with my scoring, how I'm bending this, how I'm getting guys out of position. That is the last level for a star scorer. I think Tatum has almost mastered it, right? Like
Yeah.
Tatum is not a LeBron Luka level passer, but Tatum understands what his presence does on the floor as well as almost any scorer in the NBA right now. And I think that's where Edwards needs to get. I think in game 1 he was there. I think in game 2 he wasn't. It's kind of
he's on his way. He's on his way.
Yes.
But
I
a
think
guy
in 2 years
brings up a guy like Giannis, who I don't think does this. He's at the stage where everyone's like, oh wow, he's picking up his playmaking, and he has picked up his assists, but he's still a direct passer. He's not a guy that is opening up the floor for it's why their half court offense struggles, because he's either crashing into a wall or he's evolved enough to draw a bunch of defenders and then kick to an obvious open guy. But it's the third level, the guy where that guy is going to kick to that guy, where you've set up the whole floor. That's why Milwaukee's half court offense struggles, is Giannis just doesn't bring that. It's why I don't put him in the tier of SGA or Jokic, or even I still don't think Giannis is in a absolute 100% tier 1 superstar. I really truly don't.
Well, Giannis is kind of a victim of his own success in this front, in that he has so much rim gravity that he draws so many bodies into the paint.
Yes.
That of course all of his passes are going to be to guys who are wide open, because that's just that's the nature of the way he plays offense.
Yeah.
Now, what I do think sometimes happens is playoff defense is so much more sophisticated that you do that for a whole regular season, and you get so used to the very basic act of, I'm driving to the basket. There are 3 guys here, which means that there's nobody on the left wing, which means easy 3. And then suddenly you get to the playoffs and those easy ones are not there as much. But Brad, this has been a delight. I think we should close it up here. Working on anything? Have you written anything you're proud of lately? Anything you want to share? Any football tips?
I'm just reacting right now. We'll see what happens tonight. I am going to do a piece on the physicality. I'm interested to just look at sort of the in the weeds numbers that could potentially reflect physicality, and see if they're up. But I don't even think of that. I think it's an eye test thing, and how difficult offense is, and just sort of that conversation of, from an entertainment standpoint, I'm highly entertained by these series. I don't think that fans want to watch this kind of basketball for full regular seasons. And so that gets to the chasm that you talked about between the regular season and now. But it's the story of the playoffs so far. It is the absolute story of the playoffs. It is if you think that one team has a personnel advantage, if that other team is able to play physically, it very much neutralizes a lot of would-be advantages. And it's why we're going to have a lot of dogfight series, where traditionally you would look at a matchup and say, sort of compare the tail of the tape, size, best players, best shooters, whatever. You can neutralize a lot of that stuff if you can just flat out get into the ball. And that's where these series are very, very close, where even if a team has a shooting advantage, or another team has a creation advantage, or another team has a height advantage, the Warriors can negate their height disadvantage when they're allowed to get into the ball. The Warriors they know they don't have traditional rim protection. And so what they are is super, super, super aggressive on closing down driving lanes. They close down hard, and they are physical, and they don't allow you to get to the rim. If you go look at the Warriors' rim attempts defensively, it's very low. They don't let you get there. They squeeze down, and they are physical. If you get to the rim, they don't have anybody that can block shots, so you can score against them. They don't let you get there. So you can neutralize a lot of this stuff by being super physical, and it's absolutely the overarching point of these playoffs so far across almost every series. And so I'm going to write about the physicality and see if I can capture something from a data standpoint, but more or less just kind of pontificate.
The playoffs are meant to be uncomfortable, I think, and I think what makes them really interesting is the problem solving. I think a champion in a good year where there aren't a lot of injuries that ruin it is the team that's best able to take these punches and deal with these things as they arise and say, okay, our option A, option B, and option C are off the table. We can beat you with option F. That's what's so fun about the playoffs. And right now, the big obstacle that all of these teams are dealing with, as Brad has mentioned, is the physicality of it. So keep an eye out for that story. This weekend, we're going to start to have some eliminations, which means I'm going to start having some postmortem stories on some of these teams that are getting knocked out. I'm not going to lie. I have already written my Orlando Magic story. I have already written my Miami Heat story. We're just waiting for those series to end. I'm going to try to get Memphis out today. So keep an eye out for that stuff. And
well, I want to see what you're going to write on the Bucks because
that's coming. Don't you worry.
That's
I
going
haven't started that one yet, but it's going to be a bloodbath.
You're going to hear a lot of. I know my hopes are going to get up for Giannis and the Warriors. There's going to be some stupid speculation, but they got to do something.
That seems like an appropriate place to end is Giannis on the Warriors. So that'll do it here for us on Beyond the Arc. I'm Sam Quinn. That's Brad Botkin. I believe on Monday it'll be John and Bill again as usual. So come back on Monday. Check us out. Like, subscribe, review, message in a bottle in the ocean, whatever you've got to do to get the word out. So that'll do it for us here today.